My name is Marilyn Roxy. I wanted to make a video to explain how I use Creative Commons and public domain resources to find free images, video, and sound to use in my projects, and now you can learn how to do that too. One thing that's important to know is the differences between Creative Commons licenses as well as public domain, as that affects the way that you can use the material that you find and whether attribution is required. This is a pretty handy poster explaining what the different types of licenses are. The only one that doesn't require attribution is works that are in the public domain or Creative Commons Zero. Creative Commons Zero and public domain are essentially the same. They function just a little bit differently in terms of how something becomes Creative Commons Zero versus works that have a public domain mark. I'm not going to get into that in this video. The creativecommons.org website does have a chart comparing the attributes of each, kind of the nitty-gritty of all of this. Please don't worry about this too much. Both public domain and Creative Commons Zero don't necessarily require attribution unless you want to. All of the other ones do. The licenses are sorted by least restrictive to more restrictive. Creative Commons Attribution, or CC BY, lets you copy and publish the work. It requires attribution like the other Creative Commons licenses. It's okay to use for commercial use. You can modify and adapt it, and you can also release the work with your new work that uses that work with a different license. The other ones are variations on this theme, and that changes the way that you can use it. Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike, Creative Commons Attribution No Derivatives, Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial, Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike, and Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives. So if you're confused about any of these licenses, you can always refer to a handy chart like this one, or if you don't really want to think about that too much and just want to know that the works that you're choosing are safe to do as much modification as you'd like to, you can just restrict your search to the public domain or Creative Commons attribution. Really think about how you're going to use what you're looking for. For example, if you're looking for just a picture to go with your blog post and your blog doesn't earn any revenue necessarily, then you're not going to necessarily be restricted too much by using one of the licenses down here on the chart because you're using it pretty simply. Maybe you don't even want to make any changes to it. But if you're not sure what you're going to do with it, or you know that you definitely want to make money from it, look to the licenses that are closer to the top here. So that's just a little rundown on the different licenses. Creative Commons website has some pretty thorough documentation on what all of the licenses are. So I suggest that you look at the wiki as well as just go to creativecommons.org and look at the descriptions for the licenses. This is their description for Creative Commons Attribution, for example. You can use any work under the following terms that has CC BY or Creative Commons Attribution. You must give appropriate credit, provide a link to the license, and indicate if changes were made. You may do so in any reasonable manner, but not in any way that suggests that the licensor endorses you or your use. And I'll explain a little bit more about how to attribute works later. But in any case, if something's licensed CC BY or attribution, you can share it, you can adapt it, remix, transform, and build upon the material for any purpose, even commercially. The licensor cannot revoke any of these freedoms as long as you follow the license terms. So that's it for just a little rundown about Creative Commons and public domain. I'll leave some links that explain that in the box below. And now I'll talk about one area first, which is images. So there are a few different ways that you can find Creative Commons images online, as well as public domain images. And one of the ways that most people are going to go to first is going to be Flickr. you can type in a term here. I'll use balloon as the sample term throughout all of these. So I can search photos. It's not selected to look just for Creative Commons or public domain just yet. It's just going to show my photos, people that I follow, and all the regular search results. In order to search by license, you're going to want to click on this down arrow next to any license and change to all Creative Commons, which will include a mix of all the different licenses. The ones with commercial use allowed, modifications allowed, commercial use and modifications allowed, no known copyright restrictions, which would be in the public domain, and US government works. So this is a little bit more of a readable version of the different types of Creative Commons licenses that we just talked about. It can be a little bit hard to remember at first what CC BY or CC INC or any of those things necessarily mean. So this makes it a lot easier to search. So let's say that I want to look for no known copyright restrictions. So that brings up quite a few results. There's 6,426 total, and a good many of them are from an account just called Internet Archive Book Images, which I would recommend simply searching directly in some cases if you want to use images that are from older books that have fallen into the public domain. Here's a bunch of different types of beetles here. Can just search directly in Internet Archive Book Images if I want to. I'll type in the term galaxy, for example, and it will only search this particular account. Now, if I go back to my search results, I can, if I still want to look for balloon, I can leave that there and change it to commercial use and modifications allowed. And then it will bring up quite a few results that fall under that. So it's going to include a mix of different Creative Commons licenses that fall under what I selected. So attribution is one of them, and if I mouse over the Creative Commons symbol, it will tell me that that's what the license is. You can use this work so long as credit is given to the creator. Mouse over this one. You can use this work so long as credit is given to the creator. You must then allow your work to be used under the same terms. So if you use anything with share alike, you have to apply a share alike license to your work. If you don't want to worry about that, just stick to attribution or any of the other licenses that do not include share alike. The results will also include public domain works if you choose commercial use and modifications allowed. So there's quite a lot of images that come up for that. The more restrictive ones can include, if you just go to all Creative Commons, there's going to be a huge number of results still, but it's going to include ones that are a little more restrictive, such as this one that can't be used commercially and that you can't make any changes to, for example. You can also filter your result by color if you want to, black and white, shallow depth of field, minimalist, or patterns. There's other advanced search parameters as well if you want to do that, but Flickr makes it pretty easy to search Creative Commons licenses. US government works is an interesting one as well. Copyright protection is not available for any work of the United States government. This is essentially the same as saying that it's in the public domain, but it's more of a special collection of images that are designated in this specific way, since we have the Navy, the White House, National Archives, and so on, just under this umbrella only. You can turn Safe Search on or off, which will filter explicit images if you want to, and you can change the order of the images based on date uploaded, quote-unquote interesting, which is Flickr's special algorithm, and you can change the display in any of these means of searching as well. Of course, websites sometimes change the means in which things are displayed, or they might add or remove certain functions. So what I'm talking about might change later on, but at the moment, this is what is true for Flickr. Flickr is what I would recommend first, especially if you are looking for more artistic images. Unique amateur images as well as professional photography is easy to find on Flickr. So I would definitely recommend this for you if you have kind of a peculiar subject that you're writing about, say in a blog article, or if you want to find, say for example, with the Internet Archive book images, images like these can add an interesting feel to collage works, for example. Maybe you're designing stationery and you want to add some old school flair to your design. There's a lot of really fascinating images in the Internet Archive book image collection, so I suggest that you check it out if that seems relevant to whatever it is that you're working on. Another resource that I want to talk about is Unsplash. This is one that I found out about a little bit more recently. These are all free in the public domain, and they are high resolution. They look a lot different than what you would associate with stock photography that is free. It's not clip art that we're talking about. We're talking about images that have a lot of depth and emotion behind them, images that look like you might find them in a photography magazine or a news story. These are some pretty curious images that seem to tell a story all on their own. So I really like this project a lot. Just like with Flickr, you can enter a search term. For example, I entered male model in here just as an example. So it will show you some images that meet that criteria as well as related collection of images. So I can click on tattoo, for example. And it will show all kinds of images from different photographers that have submitted their work to this website that are in that particular collection that have been curated by this user. You can change the display as well, which I recommend if you have a slower connection, because these images are so large they can actually take a while to load. I'll use Balloon again as my sample search. So you can see there's some pretty colorful and pretty images here. I feel like these kinds of images, another use for them would be, say if you have an Instagram account and you want to add an image with some motivational text, I could certainly picture images like these working great for that. Blog posts again, images that might be fun to edit and experiment with. These are some pretty cool and detailed images, and looking through the collections to find interesting things can be useful to do as well. One thing to note about Unsplash is that these images, you don't have to worry about figuring out what exactly the license is that they're all under, since they're all under the same license. They're under Creative Commons Zero, and it's available right in the FAQ section under these three dots up here. You can credit the photographer if you want to by saying photo by X, replacing the name of the photographer however it is that you use it, but you don't actually have to. Again, Creative Commons on their own license explanation can tell you the difference between Creative Commons Zero and public domain, but all that you have to really remember is that it does not require credit. You can if you want to, but it really doesn't require credit, and you can modify it in whatever way you want. The FAQ also makes it clear that it's fine to use the images commercially, and also you can even sell them, although they don't particularly care for that. So just remember that you can modify it however you want. You can use it in a commercial work if you want. They just kind of frown on reselling Unsplash photos. That's kind of an uncreative use of this wonderful resource that they've created. So that's Unsplash. One other place that I'd like to talk about is Pixabay, which is more of a free-for-all dump of free stock photos. So I'll use Balloon as my example again. And you get sponsored images at the top. So if you're looking for things for free only, you can ignore the Shutterstock images or whatever else might appear in this yellow area at the top. All your search results are down here. We've got 2,342 free images. So there's quite a lot to choose from. And you can sort by what type of images. They've even got videos, though I've not really found the videos feature to be too useful yet myself. Horizontal or vertical orientation, category, size, and color. So when I click on one of these images, it notes that it's in the public domain, free for commercial use, no attribution required. So you can use this image anywhere, and you do not have to say where it came from necessarily. You can if you want to, but it's really not required. Just use another search term, books, to give more of an example of the kind of things that come up sometimes. There's something about a lot of these images that, unlike Unsplash, there are some that have more of a unique, offbeat look, but many of them have kind of they look more obviously like clip art or stock photos than images on Unsplash, or maybe some of the images that you might find on Flickr as well. Not to say that there's anything wrong with using Pixabay, but think about what the purpose is that you're using these images for. These images I find would be really useful in a school project or slideshow presentation. And in fact, many of the images that come up when you're using Google Docs software in Google Drive, if you have a Google account, you go to docs.google.com or drive.google.com and you create a document. When you go to insert an image, there's an example to, when you're on this upload page, you can also search. And if I type in books, for example, many of the images on here come from Pixabay, like this one, for example. They come from other sources too, like Wikimedia, where people upload public domain and Creative Commons images to go along with articles, but that you can also use for yourself freely, publicdomainpictures.net, but you'll find that a lot of them are from Pixabay. So if you want to select an image and just use it in your document without having to worry about any kind of attribution and using it freely, then you can totally do that. Like I said, it's also available for the slideshow presentations or other things that you can do within the Google Drive suite. So that's Pixabay. There are vector graphic and illustration and videos, again, not found that particularly useful as of yet. You can sort by color and everything to begin with if you want to, or you can modify your search. You can also turn safe search on and off. You can explore the editor's choice, images that might be a little bit more powerful and a little bit less clip art or quote-unquote stock photo-y that you might find useful for your project. Internet Archive is a good resource, especially for public domain, but also for Creative Commons. However, it is so incredibly large and a little bit unwieldy to search that I don't necessarily recommend it as your first go-to spot for finding public domain or Creative Commons images. There is still the Flickr page where you can search some of the book images from Internet Archive that I mentioned earlier, so I'd really recommend only using that, because the manner in which you have to search sorted by Creative Commons or public domain on Internet Archive is actually quite quite difficult. When you go to search, there isn't actually a way, even in the advanced search, to simply choose a Creative Commons or public domain license. You'd have to know what exactly to put in. This is all a little overwhelming for someone that maybe hasn't browsed Internet Archive before, or even someone who has. It's just very difficult to figure out an intuitive way to do that. There is a way that I found out about based on looking at the forums for Internet Archive, because there's other people that have been curious about this as well. And what it is that you have to do is type out what type of media type you're looking for, in this case image, and it's based on each of these. We've got texts, movies, audio, software, and image, and slash metadata slash license URL colon, and then in parentheses and then quotes within the parentheses you have to link to the Creative Commons license for public domain. There's no way that most people would figure out how to do this on their own. You can also modify this with a search keyword term if you want to. I can type in the word balloon, although I don't know that much is going to probably come up. Oftentimes there's also a lot of images that are political and might not really have much to do with what you're looking for. And there's a lot of religious imagery that also gets uploaded to Internet Archive regularly that may not have to do with the search term that you entered either. So I can copy this into the description, and you would replace this URL with the license URL that you were searching for if you wanted something that wasn't public domain. So if you wanted attribution non-derivative, you would copy that and replace it here, although you might not get any results at all, because many people upload things to Internet Archive without giving them any kind of a designation. Sometimes people assume that everything on Internet Archive is free to use with or without attribution, but there's many things that have been added here that don't have a clear copyright status at all. So what I would recommend doing instead is using Flickr and Internet Archive book images on Flickr, which I had shown you if you're curious about the kind of content that are in books that have been uploaded to Internet Archive from which images of interest have been extracted. I think that Internet Archive is a lot easier to search for movies, which we're going to get to later. Or if you're searching through text, it's not really as great for images, at least right now, because of many people not even giving what they're uploading a particular license designation. Another place that you can search is Google Images. Google Images by default will just show you a mix of things, copyrighted, not copyrighted, Creative Commons, and not. It'll just all be in a pile together. I'll use Balloon as my example again. So this hasn't been sorted yet, but I can sort it by going into Tools and then also clicking on Usage Rights. So like Flickr, these designations are a little bit easier to remember than the different Creative Commons license types. So if I want the broadest range of use labeled for reuse with modification, I can click on that, and then it will modify the search results. And once again, here's Pixabay. Like Google Docs, Google Presentations, Pixabay will often come up in here along with free stock photos, public domain pictures, stuff from Wikimedia, and so on. So those are the main ways that I like to find images online. There's a ton of different websites that have sprung up now where you can find quote-unquote stock photos, public domain images, etc. But I find that it's kind of overwhelming to have all these different types of options. I think you should choose options based on what makes the most sense for the project that you're working on.